Okay, then thank you for coming back to this the webinar, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Hazel House, and well, she was a kind of invited scholar, the researcher for this project, Global Crisis on Relational Studies on the Global Crisis, during the first 2 years. And her title of her research program was, I don't know, well, now I have only in the Japanese title, and 越境的合流ヨーロッパの難民問題。She is from Tsukuba University, but she is originally from Germany, right? Yes.
European Union.
European Union, yes. Great. Okay, then you have 20 or 25 minutes for your presentation, and Dr. Matsuo will be the commentator after that. Okay, please go ahead.
I have a PowerPoint. Can I share this?
Yes, please.
Do you see something?
Not, yes. Yeah, but it's not slideshow. Do you want to change it to the slideshow?
Is it a slideshow now?
Yes, now, yes. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so I hope it works out. Yes, ohisashiburi desu. It's been a long time. And I did not reapply for second term. So as you said, I joined the first 2 years because I simply had too much research money. And it seemed ridiculous to ask for even more research money, and had so much research money that a second concentrated on the second Kaken project. Please let me know if there's any problem with the internet connection, because it's now difficult for me to see if you can hear me.
Yes, well, I can hear you, and I can see your the screen. But sometimes there might be the small minor problem in your voice. I'm gonna say the sound. But don't yeah.
I would try to make this. So 2 years research is a lot of time, and then the additional 2 years where I did continue a little bit, but as I said, I concentrated more on the other Kaken project. What I would like to just introduce or show a little bit to you in the next 20 minutes are the following points. So it's in English, it was Transnational Encounter, the European Refugee Crisis. I will give you a short overview and then concentrate on literature. That's my specialty. I'm a researcher in literature and comparative literature. The other research project was on Elfriede Jelinek, the Nobel Prize winner. It was also on the European refugee crisis, but from a much more philosophical point of view, and concentrating on the concepts of hospitality and precariousness. Hospitality being a very complex idea in Western societies, deeply rooted in theology and in philosophy, Greek philosophy, Christian and Judean religion, and a very strange phenomenon indeed, connecting the stranger and the refugee to the host, and human beings to gods, and ethics to practical help. This research I did in the 2 years with relational studies had as one big result a new research field in comparative literature, which I called relational studies in literature. And you will see that I come from a different discipline, and it may be very difficult to discuss my presentation because of that, because many of you may not be familiar with the situation in literary studies. I did some research on agency and senior citizens in Europe and particularly in Germany. And most important for understanding the problem, also on historical and political terminology. The other great result of this research work together with relational studies is my new BA program at the University of Tsukuba, which I called One Planet Relational Studies in Literature and Culture. And I will introduce this to you too. It has now finished its second year, and it's a very successful program where I have much more students than I had when I was teaching German and European literature and culture. So these were the things I started out to do. This is the research plan. It was about German welcome culture and about literature and refugees in particular, about the communication and symbols of opponents to immigration and of Japanese perspectives in the end. Unfortunately, that last part I couldn't really delve too much into. For one thing, I'm not too familiar with the Japanese and with the deep and complicated meanings of expressions and symbolism in Japan. On the other hand, as you will see, the part on literature and then creating a teaching program became much more important in the latter part of the research. So this is what I did during the 2 years, looking into terminology and history, into welcome culture and opposition and literature, looking into political and legal terminology, historical and ideological terminology, taking into account the specific situation of refugees in Germany because of the history of Germany in World War II in the 20th century, basically. Then the narratives of welcome culture. Germany as an aging society turned out to be extremely important for this kind of welcome culture. The activism of senior citizens and the verbal battles between pros and cons about immigration. And then the vast field, as I said, about literature. I did not really know, as I think most of us, what was meant by relational. And I just heard that you're still trying to figure out what is the best definition and how to use this term most proactively. So I started, of course, with a very simple idea of relation. There is trouble in Syria and there are refugees and they are moving elsewhere, and this elsewhere is affected in some way or other, and thereby there is a relation created by this act of fleeing. And the moment you look into how refugees came to Germany, Syrian refugees, you find out that there were refugees before, and that the Syrian refugees in 2015-16, the vast wave of refugees from many places was preceded by Iraqi refugees, and these were preceded by refugees from the ex-Yugoslav wars in the late 20th century. Again, when you look at Germany, you find that the Syrian refugees do not enter a vacuum. They enter a historic place in Germany. As I said, refugees from ex-Yugoslavia and Iraq. If you follow these steps from the bottom to the top, then there was the inner German East-West conflict, which was important by how these were received in Germany. Then there were the migrant workers before in Germany, and then of course the history of World War II. That means that German society, contrary to what people who are not familiar with it may think, is a highly diversified society. Nowadays, among the younger generation, a third of the population has migration background. So how can we organize literature was my question. If we have these diverse writers, for example, Abbas Khida is an Iraqi who lives in Germany. Fadia Laskani is a refugee from Syria who lives in Paris. Elaine Feinstein is a Jew from Odessa who lives in Britain. Elfriede Jelinek is an Austrian who never went anywhere But does that make her Austrian? She's hated by her compatriots. Ulrike Dresner is a German who wrote about the past of her ancestry in Eastern Europe. David Abel-Bahari is a Serbian, and Jenny Erpenbeck is another German. So how can we put these together? We used to have in the literary disciplines the national or linguistic languages opposed to the general and comparative literature. And either you look at authors from the point of view of nation or from the point of view of language, or you look at them from the point of view of general and comparative literature, and that usually means you have some kind of topic or genre that you're interested in. In this case, it may be migrant literature, migration literature, diaspora literature, transnational literature, intercultural literature. There are all these different boxes, but are they the right boxes to deal with such diversified authors? And the result of my research is that we should find another way of looking at authors and at interpreting their works, and that is in a relational studies way of looking at them, because all of these authors nowadays are highly linked with each other. There's a highly intellectual interconnectedness among authors that goes way beyond nations, nationalism, or even linguistics. So this is what I suggested, and I've suggested this the last time in 2019 at the most important international conference on literature, which is the Comparative Literature Conference. And it was received very favorably. The question is, of course, how can you connect this net of authors? And what I suggested is that you start out with one topic or one genre, a question that you have that you're interested in, and you then see how this develops. And by seeing how your questions develop, you're actually starting to create the field while you're doing your research. Instead of doing what we did before, we have the field, like the box of German literature or something else, and we just put our authors there. So here we are expected, and our students are expected, to develop the fields by themselves and to understand how the Syrian civil war is connected in literature, in philosophy, in history, with so many others, other perspectives. As you see, that goes to World War II, Nazism, then the Yugoslav wars. When it comes to Germany, it has to do with aging society. That includes, of course, also Japan and Japanese attempts to deal with refugees in connection with their aging society. World War I, then hospitality, very important question along with refugees, which then leads to Turkey and to other countries, to the Islamic world caring about these refugees, and then could lead to questions of suffering and mourning, grievability and the like. So the advantage is you lose the image of archives and retrospection in literary study. You do away with thinking in the box with migration literature, Austrian literature, and the like. You do away with labeling such as German canons, and you have to create your own work in progress. That is the most important methodological outcome of this research. You focus on the relating gesture of literature, which in literature, of course, is not only relation, but also to relate something, which in English means to tell a story. You focus on, you offer students an appropriate new approach to our changing global world. You have to relate to the world and situate literature in external context, and you should. So the authors that I have chosen deal with their experience, which sometimes is a very specific experience. So the question in relational studies of literature then is, one of the questions is, how can we understand refugee literature and civil war literature from an outsider's perspective? How does and how can literature relate unique experience, loss, fate, mourning in a transnational context? How to employ narrative techniques to convey otherness? The other part of the research was welcome culture, narratives of welcome culture, concepts of hospitality, then Germany as an aging society, and so on. Here's some background data which I have presented to you before, which basically is showing this fact that Germany is T5. The red lines give you the German population, and the black lines show you the immigrant population and how that affects German society. But of course, in numbers, it doesn't really affect so much. What happened, however, is that the senior citizens in Germany became deeply involved in the welcome culture, and it changed them within the German society. So senior citizens have always supported German society, but the refugee crisis has highlighted their immense contribution, competence, and potential. Senior citizens received more reverence and became more influential. They learned to work with networks, with the internet and the like. And then the third important part was terminology, as I said, and history, in which Germany is a very interesting and specific case. That is because it doesn't simply use immigration as one word. In fact, it very rarely uses the word immigration, but it has an abundance of words to express what is termed in English simply immigration. So here's a list of the words possible in English: immigration, immigrant, emigration, and migration, and the additional words in German. And there is, as you can see in the third line, the word Zuwanderer. And Zuwanderung, which is the German term chosen, which is a word that is not a political term, as is immigration. It does not give you the right to nationality. It simply gives you the right to stay. This is a list of the immense, the great field of German terminology concerning people moving from one country to another. You can see there are 30, 40 words, most of them impossible to translate into English. So there is a huge pool of linguistic terms from which the Germans can take to define who is coming or what is going on, or the circumstances and the characteristics of somebody who is moving. And the one that was chosen is Zuwanderung. So the new term Zuwanderung, this is the last point here, avoids the controversial term immigration and thereby supports consensus among Germans. By avoiding the term immigration, however, it postpones necessary political solutions for Germany's status as immigration country. And that is still the case. So with the term Zuwanderung, it was fairly easy for Merkel to make the Germans like the idea of accepting and being helpful, while at the same time she avoided any severe political discussion about the immigration status of these people. And this finally is my new teaching program, a BA English language program at the University of Tsukuba, which I called One Planet Relational Studies in Literature and Culture. Here's the description of the program. It offers a new approach to research in literature and culture, and for students who are interested in the future of our planet, understanding our globally shared problems and in finding creative solutions. The program focuses on global crises such as global warming, aging society, refugee and migration, gender equality, discrimination, poverty, plastic pollution, hunger, and reviews counteractfulness and stewardship. The course uses English language for international communication and cooperation for students the English-based internet research and communication. It's a program that consists of an introductory course, 2 lectures, and 4 seminars. And the seminars, and I've been teaching in 2019 and 2020, are the following. Because of the plastic waste pollution, I started out with refugees and plastic waste. Plastic waste was field work in Tsukuba City and Tsukuba University. Then we had refugee literature and philosophies of resiliency and sustainability. And in this year, 2020, we had a second class on plastic waste, Japanese literature after Fukushima, concepts of project. And I've seen that relational studies are also interested in the pandemic, and maybe there are future opportunities for cooperation. Yeah, let's stop here. This is what I've been doing, and these are the 2 great, most important results of my research is the new approach in literary research, and then the teaching of this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hazel House. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now, I'd like to invite Dr. Matsuo for comment. Yes, please. You have about 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Okay. So my name is Matsuo of Utsunomiya University, and thank you for your very insightful and informative talk. But I have heard that you would talk about the refugee issues in Europe, but today what you talk about is a bit different from what I expected, but it is very interesting. And what you talk today is it deals with very huge issues and also very complicated. So maybe it is hard for me to make any comments on what you talk today. And also, I'm not familiar with literature. Yeah, I'm always dealing with the political science. So my comment is very personal. It's not the academic one. So, and it is very interesting that you are now engaging to build a new educational program based on the literature. And because as my personal opinion, the literature is much more familiar for us than political science, so that it is very good as an entrance to understand the global issues such as refugees or poverty or discrimination that you talked about. And now here I use the term of literature as novels or stories. And I have 2 questions. And the one is, what is the goal of your new educational program, one-ponet relational studies in literature and culture? Is there any concept or knowledge or skills that students can acquire through this course? Because as I told you that the literature is very good for students to understand the global issues. So I would like to know the goal of your new educational program. And my second question is that, what should I say? I'm wondering if the course could be conducted, I mean, if your new course, your educational new course could be conducted in plural language, not only in English, but also in Japanese or German language. Because to read a work, I mean, story or novel, we need knowledge, context or perspective on which the work or novel was written. For example, you talked about the terminology about a refugee, As far as I know, maybe the meanings of a refugee, I mean, in English, and also nanmin in Japanese, maybe different or completely different. So if we can, what should I say, compare the terminology or meaning or the context of for example, refugee in Germany or in English or in Japanese, in your new educational program, maybe students get more, I mean, deeper knowledge about the refugee issues or poverty or so on and so forth. So this is these two are my questions.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Okay, please go ahead.
this is okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
This has been the problem all along. Unfortunately, I was the only literature representative. I remember only one conference where there were some people doing literature in some Near Eastern countries, I think. And that is a problem, being from a different discipline. And so I want to clarify what the problem is, which is that literature has been organized until today, until the 21st century, basically according to nations or according to language. The nation part is completely, it has never made sense. And it is today completely unacceptable because since the internet, it's completely impossible to talk about literature in terms of nations. To talk about it in terms of language is simply a practical problem, that there are, in fact, some people who do know very few languages. But the majority of people on this planet, especially in the field of literature, know 3, 4, 5 languages. And they do know that their own national literature is deeply connected to other literatures. And that's the reason why they know other languages. That's about the research program, which I thought is extremely important. And it was very well received in the international conference because comparative literature understands this problem. That we are not up to date with our terminology and our classifications if we want to live in the 21st century with literature. On the other hand, the teaching program is one, first of all, I would like to say it is deeply practical in a sense that Japanese universities have fewer and fewer students, which means these students, the younger generation, will take fewer and fewer literature humanities classes. We can see that already. This has always been the case when the younger generation becomes smaller. Societies tend to demand of their younger generation to quickly get a job and to quickly pay taxes and to not waste their time with humanities. So it is absolutely important to make clear to the Japanese society and universities how important the humanities are, and to, at the same time, to offer the students a very practical approach to humanities so that they can, after studying this, enter various professions and make use of the things that they have learned. So that is also one reason why I teach it in English, because it helps the students so much more to become fluent in English and to feel at home in the English language and to feel at home in a global society rather than just learning in rural Tsukuba University. Also, the problem, I would like to refer to Bauman, who I take very seriously about his liquid times and liquid society. I do think that our younger generation has a very serious future ahead, not rosy at all. And I would like to do everything I can to give them the opportunity to still study in the humanities, to learn about philosophy and to learn about politics, and at the same time become very practical and learn how to use what they have learned in this drastically changing society that they have to live in. And in that, therefore, it is also a field in the methodology. I also wanted that they themselves have to develop their own research. As I showed it in the develop. For example, when they learn about the terminology German, it was about terminologies. And I have had students who describe refugees, because they, as young Japanese, think nan means problem and min means people, and these people make problems. And so this has been very creative, and I hope that the students have learned a lot, and I've heard very good commentaries from my students, and the classes are also 50-50, foreigners and Japanese students, and the Japanese students are getting better and better in English. So this is why I have started this teaching program.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hazelhouse. Actually, I received one question from Flora, from a participant. I will read it. Could you maybe explain the implication of the legal terminology of the German welcome cultures in relation to both the hospitality to strangers, that means the aliens, that means the migrants, including refugees, debates in past, and the questions of asylum seeking? Well, this question, you can see this question in the Q&A box. Could you answer to this question? Can you see the question and answer box?
I'm just looking at it. I'm not really sure if I understand the full meaning of the question. What is really surprising is that the German political system and legal system has come up with this term Zuwanderung, which is not Einwanderung, which would be the English equivalent of immigration. So actually, Merkel was able to treat these people as refugees, people in need of help, offering them a sanctuary, but not offering them citizenship. And that difference, I think, was very important to get so many Germans to participate in this phenomenon of welcome culture, because there was not the discussion from the start whether these people would ever get the status of national citizenship. It was simply the question, do we help them now? And do we help them for 1, 2, 3 years? And then have the legal procedures to decide whether they can stay permanently or whether they will have to leave again. And that was probably a very smart thing to do. And what I try to show in my research is that this is not something new in German history, but that German history, certainly in the 20th century, has used language very creatively to solve political problems.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to invite some questions from the panelists. Are there any who has any questions or comments to? Yes, Tsujigami Sensei, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Hazelhouse Sensei. My question is similar to Kuboyama Sensei. But I was surprised that German culture is somehow, as you say, welcoming the refugees than other countries. Of course, from a comparative perspective. But I was surprised to hear that Merkel is trying to avoid using the term immigrant society or something. And and also she's also saying like we are helping the refugees, but in terms of the demand for the workforce, labor force, what can be said, let's say from the, I think like in Norway, in which I'm studying, they are in need. I mean, the German society needs the labor force, and And if they, I mean, the politicians are using the term like we are helping the refugees, I think it's very interesting to, as you say, creatively creating the terminology.
Okay, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't really think that the Germans are more welcoming than any other nations. What I wanted to show is that the German language, in its creative use politically, offers ways that maybe other languages don't. And for example, definitely the English language doesn't, and also the French. Even though they have this colonial past, they have very few vocabulary to express their relationship to foreigners. Whereas Germany, in the middle of a continent, not surprisingly maybe, has a huge pool of words that it can use to describe these people. So I won't do this was just a smart political thing to based on this language. As for the labor force, the British do it by saying they choose themselves and only specialists. And I think that's what the Germans would prefer too. They would rather have specialist people from India than refugees from Syria. Oh. So it's not that much of a help concerning the labor force, but it is quite a little help for the population because Germany is a really aging society. Germany and Italy are the strongest, the furthest ahead aging societies in Europe, I think. And so there will be an effect, but the effect will be much later. It will be then when these young people have their children. But what we can see already in Germany is that 1/3 of the population now has a migration background. Mm. So the German society on the whole is gradually changing to becoming a much more international society. But these are all things that you can't see right now. It will take longer until you have the after effects of what happened.
So if I'm allowed to ask one more question, what about the family unification system? Like once one refugee arrives to Germany, and if he or she wants to invite his or her family to Germany, is it easier than other European countries? Because it's going to be, again, they can somehow manipulate the demography. I don't know if it's positively or negatively.
That field, I don't know if it's easier. I know it's not easy because it's the same in the United States. They're all afraid of one coming and then asking 20 of their family to follow. So there is a huge fear of how to deal with family reunification. And I do think that the treatment of refugees after 2, 3, 4 years really shows how much welcoming there is in the end. What Merkel did was simply, I think from a historical and personal point of view, she thought that in this disastrous situation, the people dying and starving before the Hungarian border, it was necessary to make some gesture. And that's what she wanted to do. She didn't want Germany to be a country at the borders of which people are dying, because that had happened before in World War II. And so that was very important for her as a German chancellor to make clear that the Germans have changed and that they are more open-minded. How much that really means in the long term, I don't know. But at the moment, as a result of this, Germany has much more foreign refugees than other countries, and it has to deal with it. And I'm hopeful that they will learn from this experience, that they have to learn from this experience, and will become even more international.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Well, actually, Germany should learn from the past, and also the Japanese society should learn more about more from the past, and also more from the cases in Germany or any other countries. Thank you very much, Dr. Hazel.
Yeah, if I may,
Is there any?
may I say?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think it's my students, my Japanese students are making these connections. They are connecting. They actually did field work with refugee camps in Japan and connecting this to what is happening in Europe and in other countries.
Yeah, but where in Japan? You said the refugee camp.
Yeah, in Ibaraki, we have one. In Ibaraki, we have a center for refugees, right? So I have students who work there, who try to assist there. Yeah.
See, very interesting.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, actually, the presence of the refugee inside Japan is a little bit, I can say, closed, and well, this is not open for the public view in the ordinary Japanese people. So, well, I think that among the participants there are several members of the Chiba University who they specialize on the refugee and the migrant issues. So I'm sure that the Japanese academics should concentrate on more and more concentrate on the study on the migration and the refugees. Thank you very much for your presentation, and hope that we can
Thank you very much for having me
together in the future. Thank you very much for coming.